the best way for dark forces to take over vessels, those vessels have to either be empty or weakened. And the way that they do that is by breaking you down with all these traumas, all this abuse that happens, all forms of abuse. The soulless, right? The soulless creatures, their job is to break us down so that we operate at a low level to where it becomes easy for us to become the ones that empower those systems that make money out of your destruction, right? And then they'll say, well, you put yourself in that situation, you know? That's what they'll say. Like, if you go crazy, if you go insane because of these traumas, now you're going to be in that system, whether it's mental health, medical, or criminal. Those three systems are fed by the breaking of the human spirit. And the only way they can make money is by breaking people. And who's doing this? It's on a spiritual level, right? Now, that's what they call spiritual warfare. It's up to you to wake up from these illusions so that you don't fall into these systems that will enrich others but keep you impoverished and keep you in a very, very bad position. Now, you could say, some people will say, you know, this is something that is all on you. And there's some truth to that, you know. It's really up to your decisions. You know, the decisions you make ultimately will decide what's going to happen, you know. I get that, you know. We can't just blame everything on other people. I understand that. But we have to also acknowledge that there are systems, because the Matrix has various systems that they disguise themselves as benevolent. But in reality, all it is it's just all about money. That's all it is. It's just generating money through chaos. Chaos that, you know, people get caught up in because they were they're in the wrong position. They have not awakened from the illusion of the Matrix. They have not awakened from the illusion that keeps them trapped. You know, and it goes back to the idea that most people don't realize that they're actually not free. You know, you're not free because you're trapped in a board game called the Divided States, or life. You could just say it's life because that's just what life is, you know. But the Divided States, to me, I feel like it's just, the Divided States is like, it's a unique kind of place, because the Divided States, they know how to hide their crimes, you know. They know how to hide so many things. They know how to portray like they are very benevolent, you know, but we know the truth. I mean, we don't have to go into that part, but, you know, they know how to hide things and stuff like that. So it portrays this positive image of this is the place where your dreams come true, you know. And then it's very alluring. It brings people in, and certain people get caught up in certain situations because they don't understand that this is a big mousetrap. It's a lot of different snares, you know, all over, you know. And sometimes, like I said, we're gonna get back to the whole trauma thing. When you're being broken down, or when you're in a position where, when you decide to participate in this system, and when you understand who you are, you know, who are you, what's your identity, right? You're going to notice that, you know, you're not crazy for seeing this. Trust me, you're not. But you're going to realize that some people, it seems like some people, they're able to reach certain levels, right? And then on the other hand, you might feel like you're doing all this work, and no matter what you do, no matter what you accomplish, it doesn't seem to get you anywhere, you know? And so at that point, and I speak for myself, and I know there's a lot of people that feel this way, and this was before this whole job market shit. This is before the shitty job market, you know? Yes, you know, for some of us, we've been homeless in some cases. In some cases, we've been evicted long before this. So all these people talking about that, and it's just like some of us have already lived through those things. But they're talking about it as if, oh, not me. Why me? I have this comfortable job, you know. It lets you know, like, they feel like because they had this comfortable job, you know, they were prioritized. They were not getting blacklisted, right? So they shouldn't, you know, they're very conflicted and confused as to why the system is not being the system's not being nice to them anymore. But for some of us, right? Some of us, we've struggled for most of our life. And no matter how brilliant we are, no matter how many leadership qualities you have and how much you can do the work of 3 to 5 people, or, you know, as a former patient used to say, no matter how many hats you wear, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to give you a raise. And the person next to you makes more money, but they do less than you. You know what I mean? They have less responsibilities, but you have all these things that you have to take care of. And guess what? You're not being properly compensated, but they'll gaslight you and make it seem like you're not doing enough to earn that. And it's like, okay, you can't tell me that if the person next to me is literally sitting on their ass for the most part, but yet they get paid more than I, and I have more credentials than them. So you get what I'm saying? So you're not crazy for, you know, experiencing these things where you can clearly tell that you're receiving the short end of the stick. And it's the same thing in most jobs, you know. And you think that you got your you started getting whatever it is that you're getting into, you think, you know, you add more to your belt, and then you realize that you're not really getting the results that you worked hard for, you know. That's when you know, that's a sign that you have to work for yourself. And that's what I learned in my life. And I always knew this. For the longest, I always knew that I was destined to work for myself, or at least to be self-employed, or to find a way to generate income and be able to invest it, you know, and just keep letting the money work for me, you know. But of course, you got to start somewhere, because the bills don't stop, you know. I get that. But for some of us, we have to learn that. And I'm in that journey, so you're not alone. So don't feel bad. And like I said, I've struggled with so-called jobs long before these people started making videos complaining about that. Oh, I lost my 6-figure job. I don't know what to do. And I'm just laughing, like I never made that much money in my life, you know. And these people, they're freaking out about some stuff like that. I'm like, the fact that you worked a 6-figure job, I would have thought that you should have a lot of money saved up by now. You should have some shit invested by now. You should have you should have know how to day trade. Like, if I was making 6 figures for 5 to 10 years, I mean, you should be like a millionaire by then, to be honest. Because if you live below your means, and then you learn how to invest that money, you learn how to flip it, you could have multiplied that money. But the fact that you're freaking out, and I'm like, why are you freaking out for? You make 6 figures. What the hell have you been doing? You know, that's how I look at it. I'm sorry, but I wasn't born into money. I wasn't. And I'm kind of glad I wasn't, because now I'm thinking to myself, what would I do if I had that? You know, because I don't want to just blow it up. And that's what people do, because they don't think that this stuff is going to hit them. That's the thing that goes into lack of foresight, because they thought, oh, it will never be me, because they think that they're too good, right? Not realizing that some of us have already been through that. Some of us have experienced, of course, poverty from the very beginning. We were born into poverty, okay? Our parents were poor. Our parents, you know, their parents were poor, okay? Some of our parents, they came from another country, or they came from grew up in the wilderness, all right? I know in my case, my father grew up in the wilderness, in a remote area, you know, no access to running water. And so if there's no running water, you really think that there's going to be so-called education? No, right? And that's why I honor I honor my parents, you know, because they had it hard. And especially my father, you know. So yeah, you know, I honor them, you know, for real. That's something we have to do. Yes, it's difficult. All right. So now that's a little bit about me and my background, right? And so, you know, I know that I'm in a better position than my forefathers. I can say that for certain. Definitely. There's a lot of things that I learned about them, you know, from the information that was passed down to me. And one thing I could say is that, you know, there's a lot of power in gaining resilience, because resilience only comes when you go through pressure, you know. So I'm not even mad at it. I'm not mad at any of this, you know, because I realized that, and you guys can apply it as well. Some of you guys are on the same boat, is that you realize that you were born in the, this is a perfect time. Like, what a time. Like, you were born in the perfect era. You know, I used to always say that I was born in the wrong era, you know, because this is a weird time that we're in, you know. But no, now I'm looking at it like, no, we were born in the right time, because this is the time that requires change. This is a time that is in need of a spiritual revolution, you know. There's a lot of things that need to take place, and it requires a lot of leadership, you know, and there's different type of tasks that need to be taken care of, right? You know, there's so much that has to be done, but what a time to be alive. That's how I look at it now. That's my attitude. Because, you know, you realize that you're the person that was born into, you were born into poverty, you were born into all kinds of stuff that was stacked against you. But then you realize that, you know, you were the one that you like, wait a minute, you're in a better position than your parents or your forefathers. So now you're like, wait a minute. So you realize the shift in energy, right? There's a shift going on right now, you know, and certain people are losing their power and losing their shit, whereas some of us are actually feeling more empowered, and we feel more spiritually led to really step into our purpose. Why do you think that is? You know, that lets you know who you are. It's undeniable now, because now you know who you belong to, and now you know who you represent and what your identity really is on so many levels. You know exactly. You know it. Because how is it, you look back at the people that came before you and they all suffered, right? And it gets worse when you go further down into history. You notice that? You know, all the way from the 1500s. It started in the 1500s. 1492 to be exact. Yeah, 1492, and then what? For all that time, it was suffering, you know? And then all of a sudden, it gets to you, and now it seems like things are changing all of a sudden. There's a shift going on. That's a long time, you know, for suffering to take place like that. And now you're born into the perfect time where now you suffered in your early years. You did suffer, but the shift took place in our lifetime. So now in our lifetime, it's our time to elevate. It's our time for our generation to become better than the previous one. And that's something that I remember my father telling me something about, how each generation has to be better than the previous one. And that was what he said. And yes, that's true. You know, that's absolutely true. You know, and that's what kind of pushes us to, you know, forgive our parents, you know, and then we start to get into that position of honoring them too. Humans make mistakes, but essentially you look at the heart, you know, what was in that person's heart, and do they truly feel remorseful for the mistakes they made? You know, that's what's important. Now, we have the torch, right? We have the generational torch, and now we have to really, really run as far as we can, you know, run. Now, another, speaking of running, you know, there's something that, you know, and this is coming to my mind now that I'm talking about this, is that another thing that I remember my father telling me is about how, you know, running as fast as you can. You know, we've heard this. This is something that I've heard other people say. So it's like, this is like, there's an overlap with this kind of, you know, advice. This kind of thing is that, you know, you have to accept the fact that, especially when you're born into poverty, you know, and all types of generational traumas, then you know that you have to run faster than others. And sometimes it could piss you off, and I'm not gonna lie. And that's what he was telling me, don't get mad, because I mean, that's just what it is. You know, life is not fair. And we have, some of us, a lot of you guys that listen to this, you know, including myself, we have to run faster than others that, you know, they pretty much have a head start. We know that, but don't be mad at it. That's just what it is. But if anything, I remember, I'm going to end this video with this one thing that I asked my father, and that is, so now that so much has been taken away from us, what can we do now? You know, what is the point of life at this point, right? And then he said that there's nothing much we can do other than to become more powerful until our time comes.